Today on Inside Utah Politics, we're focusing on Utah's families. We're talking with Aimee Winder-Newton, the state's director of the Office of Families. Hear what she's sharing about the programs and the focus moving forward. Impeachment charges dismissed against the Secretary of Homeland Security. What we know about the historic Senate vote involving Alejandro Mayorkas. The future of Major League sports in Utah. We're breaking down the latest moves that could change the face of downtown Salt Lake City.
Time now for Inside Utah Politics.
And thanks so much for joining us, everyone. I'm Brian McElhatton. Let's go inside Utah politics today. Well, we want to welcome Aimee Winder-Newton. She's the director of the Utah Office of Families, a unique office in the country, by the way.
Absolutely. Governor Cox had a big vision, and that was we've got to do more preventative work to help Utah families so we get better outcomes for our kids. We know it's expensive to spend money on the criminal justice system or social services or all of these things later. And the data is clear. When kids have a more stable home life, they do better. So that's what I get to focus on.
Well, let's talk about that, and we should define terms right off the bat. So when we say family, what do we mean by that? How do we define family?
You know, we let people define it for themselves. For some people, it's the people that they live with. Other people may be, you know, someone that they're married to and their children. We have a lot of grandparents in this state raising children. So a family is wherever your support system is.
Families come in different shapes and sizes,
Absolutely.
don't they?
Yep.
So you've got some priorities going forward this year, and I want to start with the first one, and I think we have some points to show you here on the screen. Marriage readiness. I thought this was interesting. I don't hear a lot of states talking about marriage readiness, but we're talking about the Utah Marriage Commission and preparing young adults for marriage and financial success. Those two go hand in hand.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so what's the office's proposition here on this?
Well, so when we talk about marriage, we know that when kids come from a stable home, and when there's two parents, two is always better than one as far as being able to provide maximum stability and financial support. And so we're encouraging people to look at something called the success sequence. And this is something we need our young people to better understand, and that is that if you graduate at least high school, engage full-time in the workforce, and marry before having children, you have a 97% chance of not being in poverty. And that's huge. So that's something that we're talking to school districts about, the State Board of Education. The legislature this session just passed a resolution supporting the success sequence. We want kids to be well equipped to be successful. We have a Utah Marriage Commission. This was started in the Levitt administration. It's run through the USU Extension program, and they do a great job. They have a lot of free resources for families so that they can get relationship help online or in person. They can go to strongermarriage.org to be able to get all of this information. So there's some great resources out there. We want to help spread the word and make sure people know where they can go to get some help.
Of course, there are people out there who say, look, this is a very traditionalist view. Maybe they don't feel that marriage is for them, but they should still raise a family the way they see fit, outside of those kind of traditional norms that many of us are used to. What would you say to those folks who say, well, why are we talking about marriage from the state government perspective?
Well, you know, interestingly enough, we had a left-leaning economist that just came out with a book called The Two-Parent Privilege, and she talks about how important it is that kids have better upward mobility and better educational outcomes when they are from a two-parent home. So, I mean, it's just back to that, two is better than one. When you have two people who can give attention to a child and have financial resources, then kids tend to do better. We just want to make sure people know and are informed on that information.
Another point that we want to talk about now, protecting children, right? We're talking about youth mental health. We hear so much about that right now in the news. And child abuse prevention. We all see the negative outcomes, especially here on the news every day, right? So let's start with youth mental health and what your office is doing to work on that challenge.
Yeah, so when we look at the youth mental health crisis that we're facing right now, we're trying to get upstream. That means we're trying to get ahead of, you know, what's causing some of these mental health issues. And Governor Cox very much believes that social media is one of those harms for children's mental health.
He's talked a lot about TikTok.
He's talked a lot about it. We've seen the data. We've got lawsuits. We've got legislation. This last legislative session, we've got 2 bills that just passed. And we're also doing a campaign to help warn parents of the harms of social media for their kids. They can find information at socialharms.utah.gov on that. So we're doing a lot there to help inform parents, help them make good decisions for their kids. And we believe that that will help positively affect mental health if we can get kids off social media.
Child abuse prevention, and we talked about that actually on the news this week. We ran several stories about it and talking about reporting and the importance of reporting, even if you're incorrect in the end, even if there's no child abuse going on. The importance of reporting and talking to authorities about it if you suspect something is askew.
And one of the reasons why is when we look at trauma and childhood trauma in particular, we know that outcomes for kids, even as they become adults, their physical and mental health is impacted when they have a lot of childhood trauma. So we're trying to prevent that as much as possible. Again, this is back to prevention. And when we look at things like the legislature just funded additional education in the schools on child abuse prevention, which will be helpful. It'll help our kids better understand, you know, what they need to pay attention to. We also have resources for parents. So a lot of people in the state don't realize that if you have a frustrating situation and you've just kind of had it and you're worried about the safety of your kids, you can take them to a respite nursery that the Family Support Center runs. And we have these respite nurseries throughout the state where you can drop your kids off for a few hours and just take a break.
If you're at your wit's end,
yes,
because parents can find themselves in that situation very easily.
That's right.
Yeah,
and then there's also parenting courses through Family Support Center, through USU Extension. There's a lot of resources there for people, and we're trying to encourage parents, you know, get the help that you need so that your kids have the best childhood they possibly can, because it does affect them as adults.
And we'll put all those links on our website, abc4.com. Supporting parents, this kind of plays into what we just talked about, doesn't it? Home visitation pilot program for vulnerable families. This one was interesting to me. Tell me about this.
Yeah, so this has got to be one of my favorite things that we've done in the last 2 years. So right now we do some home visitation programs where families who have new babies and maybe are more vulnerable can have somebody come in and work with them on, you know, how to parent and how to take care of their kids in a way that's maybe healthier or whatever they need. Basically, it's based on their needs.
The baby doesn't come with a manual,
it doesn't.
as I learned when I had my
and
child.
So this is a program. One of the things it does do is help prevent child abuse. But it also, you know, gives somebody a chance to check in on parents' mental health, and is the baby getting doctor's visits, and, you know, are there things that are happening that should be for that baby's development. It also is a great way to connect them to resources. If they need help finding a job or they need, you know, some of these other things, it's a great program for us to be able to do that. So we've got that pilot program going over the next 3 years to see how we can better assess families and have them in a different level of home visiting based on their needs.
High quality care for children, that is so important, and it can be hard to find for a lot of people.
Yeah, it is. And people talk a lot about the child care shortage.
Yes.
But we also have a state where we have a high percentage of parents who want to have a stay-at-home parent. And so one of the things that we're looking at is what's the right policy balance there to do that. One of the things that we supported during the legislative session is a child tax credit. This is for all families under a certain income level. And then families can use that money for childcare, or if they're giving up an income to have one parent stay home, it helps all families that have children under that certain income level. So that's one of the things that we're looking at there. We also care about family-friendly workforce policies, and we're encouraging our business community to consider childcare stipends. Help your employees figure out how they're going to have that time and that balance with family and work. Parental leave is a big one too, and even considering hybrid work schedules so people can balance that time with family.
You know, there are other countries that are more advanced in this area than the United States are, and when you look at the state level here in the United States, a lot of states don't have any policies toward this right now. And I've heard from a lot of parents who say, look, it's just too expensive. Maybe a spouse wants to go to work, but it doesn't work out financially. It's cheaper for them to stay home instead of sending the child to care of some sort.
Yeah, and Governor Cox really believes that parents know best what is best for their children. And so being able to give them those options of, you know, if you want to work or if you need to work, let's make sure that there's high quality childcare. If you want to stay at home, you know, let's figure out a way that we can help ease that burden. So, you know, we want to put this in the hands of the parents. We believe they're best equipped to make those decisions.
Yeah. Final question for you. Where do you see your office going in the next 2 or 3 years? You're an office of one person,
yes,
right?
It's just me. Yeah. So, you know, it's a good question. That would be a question for our policymakers on, you know, how much they want to do with this prevention. I think prevention is so important. When we can look at how we can get ahead of issues, we spend so much money on the criminal justice system or social services or all of these things, and when we can get upstream from that and figure out how we can prevent some of those things, I think it's so much better.
What I'm hearing from you is if we can intervene early on
Yes.
in life, we can prevent a lot of problems, a lot of costly problems down the road.
Absolutely, and we believe that starts with strong families.
Okay, Aimee Winder-Newton, Director of the Office of Family. So good to talk to you.
Thank
you very much.
Thanks for having me.
We'll check in again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Still ahead here on Inside Utah Politics, the Senate divided on impeaching Alejandro Mayorkas. Find out why attempts to unseat the Secretary of Homeland Security was short-lived. And U.S. aid to help Ukraine and Israel. We're sharing the proposed bills, and while they're putting House Republican Speaker Mike Johnson very much in the hot seat now. Stay with us, everybody. The Speaker of the House's job may be on the line again. Mike Johnson's gavel is now in jeopardy after announcing plans to move forward with foreign aid bills to help Israel and Ukraine. Our Washington correspondent Raquel Martin has more on this.
I am not resigning.
House Republican Speaker Mike Johnson is refusing to step down, despite growing threats from within his own party to oust him.
It is, in my view, an absurd notion when we are simply here trying to do our jobs.
In response to Iran's missile attack against Israel, Johnson now says the House must act quickly to get aid to U.S. allies.
We're in unprecedented times, okay? We're in dangerous times.
Johnson's proposing a vote on 4 bills, one each for Israel, Ukraine, Taiwan, and the 4th bill, a Republican catch-all. Johnson's most conservative members say they've been betrayed.
We're steering everything toward what Chuck Schumer wants.
Kentucky Republican Congressman Thomas Massie says if Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene follows through on her effort to remove the speaker, he's all in.
There will be a lot of people who vote for it.
But it appears most House Republicans are not on board.
The last thing this country needs is to throw a speaker out, even though I disagree with what he's done.
You have to have a solution. So who are we going to put in there?
So far, Democrats are not rushing to Johnson's rescue.
It's up to Speaker Johnson, as we've said before, to deliver votes.
But House Democratic Chair Congressman Pete Aguilar says his party is open to any plan that mirrors the Senate package of military aid passed 2 months ago.
We stand willing to work with anyone who wants to deliver on that help and support.
Johnson hopes to schedule votes on the bills by the end of the week. In Washington, Raquel Martin.
And this week, Senate Democrats voted down articles of impeachment against Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. He became the second U.S. cabinet secretary ever impeached by the House. Our Washington correspondent Rashad Hudson explains what happens now.
Hey, good morning to you. The secretary's impeachment trial was over before it essentially began, and Democrats in the Senate called those articles of impeachment unconstitutional.
The point of order is well taken, and the article falls.
The Senate Democratic majority voted down 2 articles of impeachment charging Alejandro Mayorkas with failing to enforce immigration law and breach of public trust.
If we allowed that to happen, it would set a disastrous precedent for Congress.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer argued the impeachment of Mayorkas over policy disagreements did not meet the constitutional bar of high crimes and misdemeanors. Pennsylvania Democratic Senator John Fetterman said the process was a waste of time.
This was just like a really bad show that I was forced to watch.
Missouri Republican Senator Eric Schmidt and Louisiana Republican Senator Bill Cassidy pushed back, slamming Democrats for dismissing the trial.
He's blown up. He's pressed the button on the nuclear option for impeachment trials, and I think he's going to regret that sooner rather than later.
They were not considered. They were discarded. They should have been considered.
And Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says now that this is over, the Senate can return to business as usual.
Okay, we'll be watching. That was Rashad Hudson reporting. Coming up next, from Utah's NHL move to waiting on the Olympics, we'll explore what the future of sports in Utah just might look like going forward. That's after the break.
You're watching Inside Utah Politics.
Did you hear about it? The National Hockey League coming to Utah. We're going to get a team, everybody. Did you hear the news this week? It comes, of course, as the state awaits an official decision to host the 2034 Winter Olympics. So ABC4 sports anchor Wesley Ruff is joining us today to talk about the future of professional sports in Utah. What a crazy week it's been.
This is, the future of professional sports in the state of Utah has never been brighter. This is crazy. But yeah, what a week. I mean, just not even talking about BYU getting a new head basketball
coach. Right, because that's a thing too.
And the Jazz finishing their season, that's not even on the radar right now, because we're talking about the new hockey team. They had the press conference on Friday, and Ryan Smith and Gary Bettman, the commissioner of the National Hockey League in town, to welcome Utah. And this is just a big, massive deal for not only sports, but for the entire state of Utah.
And boy, the hockey news happened fast, right? Because there were rumors, and then it developed out pretty quickly. And we learned on Friday that we're not going to get a new arena for the team.
That was
big work at the Delta Center.
Yeah. So I go back to February. I got a tip that this was going to happen, that hockey was going to be coming to Utah, and Ryan Smith was going to be buying the Arizona team. And I wrote to Ryan, and he got back to me and said, this is not, I had all the detail, I gave him all the details that I had, and he texted me back and said, it's not done because the Board of Governors, nothing can be official until the Board of Governors meets. What he didn't say was everything that I had asked him about was all true. It had all been in the works. It just needed to be finalized by the Board of Governors vote, and that happened earlier this week. But yeah, it just seemed like it was quick, although I'm sure to Ryan it seemed like it had taken a while. Although he wanted an expansion franchise.
Right.
And it turned out to buying an established franchise. So it was different than he thought, happened quicker in a different way than he imagined, but here we are.
And so this works out for the NHL as well, because they've had problems for a long time in Arizona with the Coyotes and where they were going to play and the support from the community. And so they said, well, let's fix two problems here.
And it was interesting because Gary Bettman said, that Ryan Smith had been contacting him about getting an expansion franchise, and then he looked at it and said, well, wait a minute, would you be interested in this? And it solved both problems, right? It solved the problem for Ryan Smith getting a team here in Utah, and it solved the NHL's problem of what was going on in Arizona, leaving the door open for Arizona to still get a franchise in 5 years if they do in fact expand. They would get an expansion franchise, and the owner there keeps the territory. So hopefully it'll work out for everybody involved.
Because the fans in Arizona were not saying nice things about us earlier in the week, right?
No. Yeah, they weren't happy. At the last game on Wednesday night, they were all chanting, Salt Lake sucks, Salt Lake sucks. I'm like, well, that seems like an odd name for a team, the Salt Lake Sucks. Yeah, they weren't happy.
And speaking of name, we don't have one yet. That was a question at the news conference on Friday.
Yeah, that was a big question. Everybody wants to know, and Ryan Smith said he's going to take some time. And he's already gone on social media and asked people for suggestions. And of course the Yetis, Big Blizzard, Outlaws, Venom. It may just be the Utah Hockey Club for at least the short term.
For a while, yeah.
Gary Bettman, the commissioner, said it'd be better to do that while they work through the logistics and the because you got to buy the rights. Some of the team names have already been patented, so they've got to get through that. So we don't know what the team is. We may not know for about a month.
We may not know, but in the meantime, how big of a moment is this truly for Utah sports?
It's huge. I was at the announcement when the Utah Stars came back in the late 60s, early 70s, when the Stars came to Utah, the old ABA franchise. And then of course when the Jazz announced they were moving from New Orleans to Salt Lake in 1979, that was huge. Getting a Major League Soccer franchise was big. But this, just because of the way the atmosphere is in sports now, and just how big Utah is getting in the sports field and the sports world, this is just bigger. NBA is bigger than the NHL, but this announcement in this day and age in 2024 was bigger than the Jazz coming in 1979.
And Ryan talked about changes they're going to have to make to the Delta Center using technology, he said, talking about the sight lines and how to increase the capacity of the Delta Center, right?
So, the old Salt Lake Golden Eagles and the Grizzlies for a while played at the Salt Palace, or excuse me, after the Salt Palace closed, they played at the Delta Center. And the sight lines are just bad. That building was not built for hockey. Not their fault. They built it for basketball, but then they moved the hockey team in there, and it's just some of the sidelines are bad. So right now, I think they said there were only like 12,000 unobstructed views. They need to get up to like 16,200 or 17,000. They've got to redo the Delta Center. Everybody thought that it was going to be a short-term fix. They'll fix the Delta Center for a couple of years, and then they'll build someplace, either downtown or at the point of the mountain.
Right.
That's not happening. They're going to stay in the Delta Center with both franchises there, the Jazz and whatever the hockey team's name is.
And of course, tax increase comes with that too, as they work out the financing for this big project they're going to have to do. And we'll talk about that as that develops on the news side of things. But altogether, next year, we're going to have hockey here in Utah.
No, it's crazy. It's just, again, the way it happened and how quickly it seemed to happen. Things were going on behind the scenes that we didn't know about for a long time, but just the way when that ball started rolling, it rolled quickly, and here we are with a hockey franchise.
Something else we got to talk about.
Okay.
The Olympics.
Yeah.
Some big wigs from the IOC were in town touring Utah and learning about us. And where do we go from here, Wes?
This is interesting because Salt Lake did it right in 2002 with the Olympics. We were the only place that still has facilities that are still being used. A lot of the other places that had Olympics, they just let their arenas, their facilities go to pot.
They just crumbled.
Yeah. And we had a thing in place where there was a perpetual fund where they were able to fund these arenas to keep them up, and everybody has still been training in these. All the facilities have been used that were used in the Olympics. They're still being used today.
Foundations set up to keep them afloat.
I mean, athletes who weren't even born when the 2002 Olympics were going on are now training for what could be the 2034 Olympics here in Salt Lake on the very same at the very same venues that the Olympics took place in.
Imagine that, these kids that are just aiming for that, right?
No, and it's been, like they said, the facilities now are even better than they were then. I mean, they've kept them up, and you know, the ice arena at Kearns, the luge track, the bobsled track, the ski jump areas. It's just all the ski resorts. It's great.
Okay, so for those of us who weren't living here at the time, what's it like when the Olympics comes to you?
It's an interesting story. I was against the Olympics.
You were?
I was.
Why?
Because I just thought it was going to be just total chaos and a mess that you wouldn't be able to drive anywhere in town. I seriously considered taking that when the announcement was made, and it was 6 years out. Like we had 6 years to prepare for it. I seriously thought, I'm going to take vacation when the Olympics are here, rent my house out to some journalists, let them stay in my house. I'll go someplace else. They can deal with it. And that was what I thought.
Yeah.
But when the Olympics came, it was amazing. There was not a single problem here. And you have to remember, this was the first big worldwide event after 9/11.
True.
I mean, it happened, you know, the Olympics were in February, March, whatever, February, I guess it was, but that was the first big world, and there was a lot of security. People don't know about it. There were snipers on the roofs of the buildings here in Salt Lake and buried in the snow up on the ski resorts. Yeah, they were prepared.
Because this was a country on edge.
Exactly. And again, this was the first big worldwide event where the world was coming together after 9/11. But there was not a single problem. People were friendly. You go downtown, and it was great. I loved it. We went downtown a bunch, and they had concerts there every single night in the parking lot, kind of kitty corner from the Delta Center. They had a big, massive stage there, and they had concerts with different, either country and western or pop or easy listening people every single night at that, and you could go, you know, pay whatever for tickets. And we went and watched the Bare Naked Ladies one night.
Wow, yeah.
I mean, it was so fun. I loved it when it was here, and I was against it.
Wow, and the world's cameras descend on Utah, and we're very much in the global spotlight there.
Yeah, and which is good for the economy, right?
Sure.
And the same thing is going to happen with the PGA Tour event that happens down at Black Desert. People are going to see that on television and want to come play. And that's what happened with the Olympics here. People saw on television, like the ski resorts, and like, oh my goodness, that looks awesome. I want to go ski there. I want to come to Salt Lake or Utah and be there because this looks amazing on television. And the Sports Commission bills this as the state of sport.
Yeah.
Utah is the state of sport, and they proved it.
A little sports diplomacy there.
Yeah.
Wes, thanks for being here.
Yeah,
you know,
pleasure.
people are going to say, what, are you running for office? You're on the show. He's not, folks. He's just giving us the scoop on sports, as he always does. Thanks for being here. We
My
appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, and stay with us for more on Inside Utah Politics coming up after the break. Stay with us, everybody. We'll be right back. Before we leave you, here's what's on our radar for you this morning. The Utah Republican and Democratic parties will hold their nominating conventions April 27th, 1 week from now. The United Utah Party had theirs on Saturday. We'll hear more from them in the weeks ahead. And of course, we'll have all the latest for you each week right here on Inside Utah Politics. And while we're at it, find ABC4 on social media to follow along no matter where you are. Download the ABC4 News app. We're always on there, bringing you breaking news and political updates round the clock. Thanks for being with us, everybody. We'll see you right back here next week. Bye-bye.